Hi everyone, my name's Emily and I'm the Programme Officer for Training at Student Minds. Last year I was involved in my university's application to the Mental Health Charter Award as a student lead, so today I'm going to share a bit about my experience and some tips for any of you if you're student leads or if you're working with student leads. So, my role as student lead began in January 2022 and lasted until June 2022 when we had our on-site visit. I carried out the role part-time alongside studying for my master's full-time. And as I joined during the start of the self-assessment process, the main responsibilities of my role were to gather student views on areas of good practice and improvement at the university in line with the Mental Health Charter Award framework, and condense these student views into a report that would be submitted alongside the university self-assessment document. Also, as part of my role, I was able to read and reflect on the university's self-assessment document to make sure that it was authentic to student views and kept students at the centre of the award process. My responsibilities also included recruiting students to participate in the student focus group that took place on the on-site visit, and also attending meetings at the on-site visit alongside the award lead and interacting with the assessors. So one of the things that worked really well for me as student lead was the support I was given by the university, particularly in putting me in contact with key members of staff at the University and Student Union who had already been involved in gathering student views on mental health and wellbeing through various research projects and reports over the last few years. This was really helpful because it gave me access to loads of secondary data which I could use to analyse and gain a broader perspective of student views than I could within my own circle. So that was really helpful, and that secondary data analysis formed the basis of my report. Additionally, I was also supported by the Wellbeing Sabbatical Officer at my students' union, which was really helpful as they acted as a great sounding board, and also reassurance that my reflections and conclusions on student views were reflective of what they had experienced during their time in office. Another thing that worked really well was the amount of autonomy and independence the university gave me over the student voice gathering and report writing process. From the start, the university was really clear that they wanted the student report to be a very candid and uncensored view of how students felt about wellbeing and mental health at the university. So this is a value that I really respected and carried forward in my work. The university staff didn't actually see my student report until I submitted the final draft. So that meant that it was only me and the Wellbeing Sabbatical Officer working on the document, which in hindsight was probably quite scary for the university to give us kind of total control over it. But I think at the end of the day, it allowed us to write a really authentic report, which in the long term will be more beneficial to the award process and the university. A final thing that I thought worked really well was that because I was not a sabbatical officer and I was just a student, I didn't have a complicated relationship with the university that required me to challenge them and be critical and hold them to account. So this allowed me to act as a sort of mediator between the sabbatical officers and the university, and allowed me to pass on student views in a constructive way to the university rather than a critical way. The main challenges that I faced during my time as student lead was mainly related to the sheer scale of the charter framework and all the areas that it covered. I found that, especially when trying to write up the report, it was very difficult at first to condense students' views into the report while still retaining the breadth and depth of those views. So that was one of the biggest challenges I faced. To tackle that, I had to be really careful about making sure I picked out the key points and how students feel, but also representing the diversity of students' views and experiences. Another challenge was the tight timescale of my university's application to the award. And because I joined during the self-assessment process, I felt like I had a lot of catching up to do in terms of getting my head around the charter framework and the award process, as well as trying to figure out how I was going to collect student views and write up the report. So I think that's something I definitely struggled with at first, but again, the support from my university and the award lead were really good at helping me get up to speed. So ensuring student voice was reflected diversely within the report was something that I was really conscious about when starting the project, because I was very aware that my experiences at university were very unique to me, and that there was lots of subsections of the student body who were facing challenges and having experiences that I couldn't relate to or understand. So it was really important to me that I was able to really explore in depth those students' experiences so that I could understand them well enough to reflect them in my report. And one way that I did this was by holding a focus group with all the sabbatical officers, liberation officers, and course reps at the student union. And that enabled me to have a discussion with about 60 different students and tailor the discussion around areas of the framework that I wanted to know more about. This really helped me to get an in-depth view of how students feel from different groups and backgrounds, and really enabled me to ask the questions that I needed to ask to be able to fully understand their experiences. So I think this, alongside the secondary data that I had access to, enabled me to feel more confident that I'd been able to collect diverse student views and that I would be able to reflect these authentically within the report. So finally, my top tips or advice that I would give to student leads or staff that may be working with them would be to try to give the student lead as much autonomy and independence over the student voice gathering process and report writing process as possible, because this allows for the report to be as authentic and candid as it can be, which in the long run is more beneficial to the university to truly understand how students are feeling. And secondly, my advice would be to give the student lead lots of support in terms of connecting them with people around the university and Students' Union who can help them out, who have expertise in terms of student voice and have conducted research already around mental health and wellbeing. This really helped me get started in my role, and especially as it was my first year studying at the university, it helped me to gain an understanding of the mental health and wellbeing landscape at my university and the sort of recent history in terms of that. Yeah, so that has been my experience as student lead, and I hope you've learned something from my top tips that you can carry forward into your own work towards the University Mental Health Charter Award. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask my colleagues. I'm sure they'd be happy to pass them on to me and then I can answer them for you. And thank you for listening.